Good afternoon. It's Thursday, the 12th of February. I'm Erin Viner, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. We open with the ongoing war against the Islamic State and efforts by U.S. President Barack Obama to secure additional authorization from Congress for the use of military force against the group in Iraq and Syria. That approval would also facilitate increased cohesion among the international coalition against ISIS that includes Arab nations. IBA's Margo Dudkevich has been following the developments.
The war against the Islamic State appears to have ratcheted up after U.S. President Barack Obama asked Congress for new powers to boost the military operation against the brutal Islamist terrorists in Iraq and Syria. The request calls for increased air power as well as the use of ground troops in limited circumstances for up to a 3-year period. This in addition to some 3,000 American security forces already deployed in Iraq in an advisory capacity. Obama's request comes just days after Jordanian and American security officials revealed that a ground offensive led by Iraqi security forces to fight ISIS is already in the making.
This resolution reflects our core objective to destroy ISIL. It supports the comprehensive strategy that we've been pursuing with our allies and our partners. A systemic and sustained campaign of airstrikes against ISIL in Iraq and Syria, support and training for local forces on the ground, including the moderate Syrian opposition, preventing ISIL attacks in the region and beyond, including by foreign terrorist fighters who try to threaten our countries.
The President's been pretty clear about what he envisions for our strategy, and it is codified in the language that was submitted to Congress today. It notes or it places a limitation on the ability of the Commander-in-Chief to order enduring offensive ground combat operations in Iraq and in Syria.
The request has sparked off a debate in Congress where Democrats seek to further limit the use of American troops on the ground, with Republicans supporting in principle the use of ground forces, but wary of the vagueness of the strategy. It also kicked off a renewed national debate over the scope of wartime powers that should be given to the Commander-in-Chief.
Received the President's proposed authorization for the use of military force against ISIL and its affiliates. It was clear from the outset that a successful military campaign to defeat ISIL would require a multi-year effort. So it's certainly in order for Congress to debate an authorization like this.
This use of military force to deal with ISIS is an important step forward. And I think the President's going to have to go out and make his case to the American people. The delivery of this authorization is the beginning of a legislative process that will involve hearings, markups, and I'm sure changes as we go through this process.
I want to say that in crafting this resolution, we have consulted with and listened to both Republicans and Democrats in Congress. We've made a sincere effort to address difficult issues that we've discussed together. In the days and weeks ahead, we'll continue to work closely with leaders and members of Congress on both sides of the aisle.
During a visit to Australia, Iraq's Foreign Minister Dr. Ibrahim al-Jafari said his country had never requested ground forces to enter Iraq. The past week saw Jordan increase its airstrikes on ISIS targets after vowing an earth-shattering response to the horrific burning to death of its pilot at the hands of ISIS. Yesterday, the head of Jordan's armed forces, General Mashal Mohammed Zaben, held talks with his Iraqi counterpart in Baghdad. At a press conference, the Jordanian general said the Hashemite Kingdom's armed forces are working closely with their Iraqi brothers to defeat ISIS. Margo Dudkevich, IBA News.
16-hour overnight marathon talks in Minsk between Ukraine's president with his counterparts from Russia, France and Germany concluded with an announcement that a comprehensive peace deal has been reached for his country, although questions remain whether Kiev and the pro-Russian insurgents have actually accepted all the terms in the deal. Russian President Vladimir Putin told reporters that the proposal includes a ceasefire beginning on Sunday and the setting of a special status for the rebel regions provisions for border controls and humanitarian issues. Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko is, however, denying that there was any agreement over autonomy in the eastern sector of his nation. More than 5,300 people have died in the fighting since April, which continued to rage today, even as the four leaders were engaged in talks. The Beersheba District Court today charged 3 suspects with committing security offenses for trying to smuggle material intended for weapons manufacturing into the Gaza Strip. Information for publication was released yesterday about the details of a joint mission by the Shin Bet and the Israel Navy that foiled that attempt, as well as a video of the January 19th interception. The IDF said that the suspects were arrested after the capture of their motorized vessel that was en route to the Gaza Strip from the Sinai Peninsula. Liquid fiberglass was found on the boat, although no other materials or weapons were reported to have been confiscated. The suspects were brought into Israel for interrogation, where they said that the fiberglass was destined for the Hamas Izzadin al-Qassam Brigade's military wing for use in rockets and mortar shells. The 3 also reportedly supplied information regarding the maritime smuggling route between the Sinai and Gaza and use of fishermen and smugglers by Hamas for its own purposes. Shin Bet officials say that the men admitted that the terror group also smuggles in civilian products sold at a profit to Gaza residents, with the earnings used to fund its activities. Turning now to campaign news, and the Central Election Committee today voted to disqualify Balad member of Knesset Hanin Zoabi from running in the March 17th balloting. The United Arab List immediately announced that it would appeal that decision to the High Court. In other developments, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has announced that he is open to the idea of participating in a candidates debate. Here with all of the election news is IBA's political correspondent Ellie Wogelenter.
The Central Election Committee voted 27-6 this afternoon to disqualify Hanin Zoabi of the Joint Arab List from participating in the upcoming general election. Zoabi said that she wasn't surprised by the ruling, adding, "I'm certain the High Court of Justice will reverse the decision. I represent the democratic public in Israel. Election laws forbid anyone who openly supports armed conflict against Israel from running for Knesset. It was that law that formed the basis for appeals to the committee against her candidacy. Evidence presented included her being aboard the Mavi Marmara Gaza flotilla in May 2010, and her statements that the kidnappers of the 3 Israeli teenagers last summer were not terrorists, comments that led to her 6-month suspension from Knesset committees and debates. Attorney General Yehuda Weinstein came out against disqualifying her, while the Likud, Bayit Yehudi, Yisrael Beitenu, Shas, Yachad, and Zionist Union parties supported banning her. Amid frequent outbursts from the assembled MKs, Zoabi defended herself, arguing that the MKs speaking out against her and petitioning the committee to ban her are people who have no problem with the killing of Palestinian civilians. Answering charges that she refused to apologize for previous statements, Zoabi said that she would not take back any principled stance she took or actions against the occupation and injustice. Zoabi has been barred from running in past elections, but the disqualifications were overturned by the High Court of Justice. The committee is also scheduled to vote later today on a petition to ban far-right activist Baruch Marzel of Yachad. Meanwhile, in other election news, Prime Minister Netanyahu said he would be willing to consider a televised debate with the heads of other parties running for the Knesset. Netanyahu last participated in a debate at the end of his first term as Prime Minister in 1999 against Yitzhak Mordechai, seen here. Ehud Barak did not partake in that one, and no Prime Minister has participated since. Likud sources say a decision will be made only after Netanyahu returns from Washington, where he will deliver his speech to the U.S. Congress on March 3rd. An official at Netanyahu's campaign headquarters said all options are open. We have not refused the debate. The announcement came a day after the major Israeli news stations invited all the leaders of the various parties to a televised debate, which is not common in Israel. The television stations said they plan to hold the debate even if not all the leaders agree to it. All the party chairmen have said yes to the invitation, except Netanyahu and UTJ Chairman Yaakov Litzman. Erin?
Thanks for that report. Following widespread criticism of the Prime Minister's vetoing 2 candidates from serving on the Israel Prize jury, Netanyahu today wrote on his Facebook page that the prestigious award is an asset that belongs to all of Israel, and those selecting the laureates should reflect a more balanced cross-section of society, unlike, he wrote, extremist anti-Zionists who have been appointed in recent years. The entire panel of judges for the Literature Prize have resigned over what they say is an unprecedented and clear politicization of the prize after Professors Avner Holtzman and Ariel Hirschfeld were disqualified. The Prime Minister's office said that the panel's composition was reviewed after learning Hirschfeld supported conscientious objectors in the IDF. but that no reason was given for Holtzman's dismissal. The Israel Prize panel is generally approved by the education minister, but that position is currently being filled by Netanyahu since the collapse of the coalition government and the subsequent resignation of Yesh Atid's Shai Peron. The state comptroller's office is now investigating the issue after Zionist union leaders Isaac Herzog and Tzipi Livni filed complaints. The North Carolina gunman who shot 3 young Muslims to death had posted anti-religious messages on Facebook. 46-year-old Craig Stephen Hicks has been charged with first-degree murder. The full-time paralegal student from Chapel Hill was handcuffed and wearing an orange jail jumpsuit during his brief appearance before a judge who ordered that he be held without bail pending a probable cause hearing next month. The victims were a newlywed couple and the sister of the wife, who were all involved in humanitarian aid programs for Muslims in the Middle East. The murdered husband studied at the University of North Carolina, where students gathered for an evening vigil and prayer service last night. The victims and the alleged killer resided at the same apartment complex, and investigators say that while they believe that the shooting was motivated by a dispute over parking, ruling the incident as a hate crime has not yet been excluded. The victims' friends, family, and members of the local Islamic community continue to insist that the 3 were targeted because of their faith.
I want to make sure that folks knew that based on all the information that our office and that law enforcement has at this time, that the events of yesterday are not part of a targeted campaign against Muslims in North Carolina or anything other than an individual event that occurred. We don't have any information that this is part of an organized effort against Muslims, and I did want to address some comments made on social media about that and to make sure that people know that this appears at this point to have been an isolated incident.
We're sad, we're distraught, we're shocked, we're angry, we feel we were treated unjustly. This is uncalled for. We heard from the media, not from the media, from the police folks that each one of these children had a bullet in the head. This was an execution style. This was a hate crime from a neighbor our children spoke about. They were uncomfortable with. He came to their apartment more than once, condescending, threatening, and despising, and talking down to them.
The motive for the murders has not been determined yet, but there are a number of factors that we look at as indicators of a possible bias motive. The first being the brutality of this crime. Police say it began with a parking dispute, but I find it hard to believe that you would have 3 individuals murdered execution style by being shot in the head over a parking dispute if there were not other factors involved here. The alleged perpetrator had made anti-religion, anti-Muslim statements online, had posted an image of a loaded handgun online.
The trial of a Bosnian Muslim cleric accused of recruiting fighters for the Islamic State forces in Syria and Iraq has opened in Sarajevo as part of enforcing a new law designed to stop recruits from joining the extremists in the Middle East. Hussein Bosnik is known as an unofficial leader of the ultra-conservative Salafi movement in Bosnia and was arrested in September along with 4 other suspects who were later released due to a lack of evidence. Bosnik is being charged with publicly inciting and recruiting followers to commit terrorist acts and of organizing a terror group since 2013. The prosecutor told the court that at least 6 members of that organization are known to have been killed while fighting in the Middle East, and that others who are still there represent a threat to Bosnia's state security once they return to the country. During public addresses, the defendant, who's also known as Bilal, allegedly glorified martyrs for Islam and said that killings are justified in the struggle for the faith. He is denying the charges against him and claims that he is being persecuted for openly expressing his religious beliefs. The Islamic State group has published what it is claiming to be an interview with the widow of the French gunman who attacked a kosher supermarket and a police officer in Paris last month. murdering 5 people before being killed in a raid by security forces. The text interview, published in French and English, did not name Hayat Boumediene directly, nor show any images of her. It appears to be the first confirmation from the Islamic State that she has joined the group in Syria, as is widely believed after a posthumous video emerged of her husband, Mehdi Coulibaly, pledging allegiance to its leader. In the stilted responses laced with references to the Quran, she called on women to be more patient and to make life easier for their men. Boumediene is thought to have traveled to Turkey before crossing into Syria around the same time as the attacks were unfolding in Paris. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas has been holding meetings with top European Union politicians in Brussels as part of his mission to enlist further support of Palestinian statehood. The efforts come on the heels of talks that Abbas held with Swedish officials in Stockholm following the decision by the Scandinavian nation in October to become the first Western European nation to officially recognize Palestine. Abbas spoke with EU Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker while in Belgium, as well as the foreign policy chief of the 28-member organization, Federica Mogherini. As part of a strategy to sidestep stalled peace negotiations with Israel, the PA has been lobbying the international community to formally acknowledge the entity's claim of sovereignty over the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip. The police officer suspected of an unlawful killing in the Bedouin city of Rahat last month was arrested last night following an undercover investigation that unfolded over recent weeks. 22-year-old Sami Al-Ajar was shot to death during a raid on an alleged drug dealers. According to a statement released by police, the officer in question was taken into custody after implicating himself during lengthy questioning and persistent denials pending further investigation. Thousands of angry mourners attended Al-Ajar's funeral, pelting a police car that entered the area of the cemetery with rocks and erupting in riots that claimed the life of another resident and wounded 22. Veteran American television journalist Bob Simon died at the age of 73 in a car accident in Manhattan. Witnesses say that the car that Simon was being driven in first veered into another vehicle before careening into a barrier. The longtime 60 Minutes correspondent was born to a Jewish family in the Bronx and had a distinguished career in journalism that spanned 5 decades, covering crises, war, and unrest in 67 countries. He wrote about his experience of being imprisoned in Iraq during the first Gulf War in a book called 40 Days, about the time period that he was held captive. Simon spent a great deal of time here in Israel, first during the 1973 Yom Kippur War, then as CBS bureau chief in Tel Aviv from 1977 to 1981, and during frequent visits to cover breaking stories. Here now is a brief look at Simon's coverage of the Iron Dome missile defense system.
Iron Dome is a technological marvel, a cutting-edge weapon of war that even some pacifists might come to love. Instead of killing people, Iron Dome saves them by intercepting rockets loaded with explosives before they can land on innocent civilians. And it does all this in less time than we've just spent explaining it. The system was developed by Israel with hundreds of millions of dollars of support from U.S. taxpayers. It's been called a game changer that might relieve military pressure on Israel and make it easier to achieve peace in the Middle East.
Every year, a sect of Shiites known as the Dawoodi Bohra come to Ashkelon from all over the world, including Muslim nations, to worship at a shrine of Hussein ibn Ali, who was the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad. Alexander Jen has more on the annual pilgrimage in this report.
Just kilometers beyond the Israel-Gaza border, high on a grassy hilltop in Ashkelon, sits the Barzillai Hospital. And within its grounds, the once burial site of the head of Hussein bin Ali, grandson of the Prophet Muhammad. Every year, a group of Shiite pilgrims comes to this holy site to worship. The Dawoodi Bohra sect believes the head of Hussein was kept there for more than 200 years before it was taken to Al-Qahira, Egypt.
We believe it to be a holy spot for us, and we believe that this can be a holy haven for everyone.
Hussein is an important figure in Islam, as he is a member of the household of Muhammad. In Karbala, Iraq, on October 10, 680 CE, Hussein and at least 72 of his followers engaged in an unsuccessful battle to their death and beheading. Their bodies were not buried for 3 days, but Hussein's head was taken to Yazid in Damascus as a signal of victory. Then, it secretly journeyed from Damascus to Ashkelon in an attempt by the Sunnis to stop the pilgrimage to the sacred head. After about 200 years, Hussein's head was taken to Al-Qahira, Egypt, its final resting place. Shiites commemorate Hussein's death every Muharram, the first month of the Islamic calendar. Perhaps the most ironic aspect of this story of worship is the medical center on whose ground the mosque sits, known for treating the many casualties of war in the Gaza Strip.
This is one of the absurdities of the Middle East. Here we have a sacred place for the Muslim, for the Shia Muslim. Peaceful people are coming from India and pray here several times a year. And on the other hand, 12 kilometers south from here, we have other Muslims that shoot rockets at us. Sometimes they coincide on the same day.
Sheikh Tarmo believes divine intervention played a role in the protecting of the hospital during last year's Gaza war. We can expect to see the Shiites again next year, as they are continually asked to visit these holy places to pray for peace and humanity. Alexandra Jen for IBA News.
Taking a look at local finance, the shekel today lost strength in foreign currency trading, while share prices on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange were up across the board. Here's a look at the afternoon numbers. The IBA weather team tells us that the unseasonably cold temperatures are going to continue. There will be more thunderstorms in the north and center of the country tonight, carrying on tomorrow as well. And that powerful wind is going to continue lashing through the region. Here's the forecast to Amanda Broad over the next 24 hours. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. I'll be back at this desk tomorrow, same time, same channel. Hope to see you then. I'm Erin Viner, wishing you a great evening and shalom from Jerusalem.